Hello, and welcome back to the CivilNet podcast. I'm your host, Kocharyan. After a relatively quiet summer following Armenia's June parliamentary elections, this week has brought a number of important developments. The government is now setting out its priorities for the next 5 years, including consequential decisions that will define where Armenia is headed. Here, as always, to help explain the stories behind the headlines is CivilNet's political commentator, Eric Hakopian.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Eric. So first of all, back on Monday, we had a very wild, perhaps, session of Parliament. It started off with Pashinyan announcing some big news that it is finally going to be applying for EU membership soon, and also had some things to say about relations with Russia. So tell us about that.
Well, I mean, many things that came out of that session of Parliament, but it's very clear that this Russian warfare, economic warfare in Armenia has actually made the job of this government easier in clearly saying what's always been intention, but they didn't want to push the timeline, which is that they eventually want to apply for EU membership, which is a very complicated process. You know, there's countries that are 10, 15 years in line ahead of us in that entering that EU process, because applying and becoming a member are two completely different things, because applying is a process, membership is a political decision, and there's no signal from the EU that they're close to any expansion anytime soon. But this government always wanted to extend that timeline and being able to be forced to make that decision, because they know that EU membership is not a realistic option in the short run. So you don't really want to get out of the Eurasian Union until you actually know that you can you actually can apply to the EU as a realistic possibility. The Russian pressure is sort of forcing their hand, but it's also making it easier to do politically, because logically, when your average Armenian citizen thinks, what are we getting out of the Eurasian Union where we can't even sell our products, that it's just being used. And, people don't know that every year we send $280 million a year in customs fees to the Eurasian Union. Like, why do we need to do that based on what we're getting back? So it was very clear that sometime over the next short time period, whatever that would be, months or years, there'll probably be a formal membership application turned in from the Armenian side to start that process, which almost certainly will bring about an end to our membership in the Eurasian Union, which in some ways has already happened. Then he moved on to the CSTO, where he said he would actually be glad if they throw us out. I mean, CSTO, frankly, at this point, CSTO is the Russian-led military alliance, which proved to be completely ineffective, both in the invasion of Armenia in 22 by Azerbaijan, and obviously during the ethnic cleansing in Artsakh. So but as a practical matter, we're not in the CSTO, and the CSTO is gone. There's no such thing for our purposes. So that decision has already been made. We're left as a non-voting member, but everybody knows we're out. Whether we're formally out or not, or we get thrown out, makes absolutely no difference at this point.
Yeah, the Kremlin spokesperson was kind of taken aback, or he said, by Pashinyan's statement that, it'd be easier if you just kicked us out. We'd be happy if you did that, because, we're just kind of tired of this. But technically, the membership is still frozen, and they said it's going to stay that way for the next 5 years. So very complicated things when it comes to Armenia's alignment, but it's clear that we're moving in this direction to the EU, even if we're not going to get in for the next 5, 10, 15 or more years.
Well, I think one of the key things that people need to understand is, because it's easy to say you're not going to become a member, but the process itself, there's twofold to it. The process of becoming an EU candidate forces you to make a lot of mostly positive reforms internally, stuff that we need to do anyway, having an independent judiciary and half a dozen different things. So those are all good things that will help the country, even if that timeline is 15 or 20 years down the road. So those are all good things. And within that process, the application process, you actually do deepen your relationship and your economic relationship and the aid that comes from the EU. So it actually elevates where we're at with them one level higher. But I think it's very important for people to understand that membership is a long way down the road, if at all.
people keep seeing these headlines, Armenia will be applying for the EU, and they have these ideas. The same thing was happening with the visa liberalization. People were thinking that's tomorrow, oh my gosh, when at the very earliest 2028, 2029, but it very well could be later than that. But it really is something, as you said, for even just a few years ago, we were hearing all the time, the conventional wisdom was Armenia being in this Eurasian Union, Russian customs union, because it does so much trade with Russia, it was said it was beneficial for Armenia. However, Russia has now cut off almost everything. So they've really, kind of sawed off that branch that they were sitting on. Because now we have no choice. I mean, they make fun of Armenia. They're like, oh, well, the EU is not going to take you anyway. So you're just on a bridge to nowhere. But it sounds like the Russian path has been the bridge to nowhere here.
Generally, yes. I mean, it's they're the best gift outside of the current opposition. They're the best gift to this government because they keep making their life easier on things that they want to do, which in this case is the pivot towards the EU and eventual EU, applying to join the EU. So it's just part of the same relentless wrong decisions made by the Russian state that has alienated this country and lost the majority of people in this country who were never naturally. They didn't have the natural anti-Russian feelings that so many post-Soviet countries actually had.
So when it comes to this perhaps geopolitical favor that Russia has been doing for Armenia by really just, making themselves so unpopular, at the same time, it is doing a number on the internal economy. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, it's a nuanced thing that we need to understand. This blockade of goods to Russia is having a huge impact on rural areas in Armenia. In real terms. You've seen it in farmers' actions, blocking of roads, protests in front of the Prime Minister's office. It's two concurrent things at the same time. This is far more damaging than people would admit because whatever substitute markets we're finding are not easy to get to, and they don't deal with the totality because so much of our agricultural exports went to Russia. So this is the kind of issue that actually impacts a lot more lives than it actually impacts the totality of the economy. And the reason is because agriculture every year becomes less and less relevant part of this economy, with services, construction, IT, and other things taking a bigger share of it. So we might go through this thing at the end of the year, and the statistical hit on our growth might be to go from 6% to 4.5%, or from 5% to 3.5%. So statistically, from a very economic model, it's going to look like, oh, these Russian bans had no effect. But in fact, they've had tremendous effect on the 600,000 people who are essentially farmers and living in rural Armenia, because and the reason we're not seeing it is because those are the least people to protest. They're the least seen. They have the least access to media. They have the least capacity to tell their stories. But there's a lot of real hurt out there if you go out there, because these people are not used to who are they. There's fish producers, for example, who don't necessarily. This notion of the filling out EU paperwork is just an alien concept for them to be able to get into these markets. So we're going to have two things. The impact is real, and where the impact actually matters is this is the Prime Minister's base. This Russian cutoff of export is an attack on Prime Minister's base. That's who it impacts the most, because the people who are most against the Prime Minister are least impacted by this, because they're urban, they're higher income, and this is not something that affects their livelihood. So I think we have two things. On paper and on numbers, the economic impact will be minimal, could be quite minimal, while the impact on real people's lives is actually quite substantial.
So what this day also saw in Parliament was a whole lot of tumult coming from second President Robert Kocharyan's party. Robert Kocharyan is not in Parliament, but his son Levon is. There's also one of its tactical leader, Anna Grigoryan, were there, and they were hammering Pashinyan with statements that he was clearly not happy about, using terminology that probably from your show, basically the Aliyah referendum and the like. And that set up what happened the very next day with the arrest of Robert Kocharyan. What's going on here?
I think when it comes to the arrest or the prosecution of former presidents, it's always on the claim that it's always on corruption charges. We have to understand the complexity of it, because there's two concurrent things. that can actually both be true. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in this country who does not believe that Mr. Kocharyan, the former presidents, and many, many, perhaps hundreds of people around them have stolen assets, certainly opportunity, and a lot of things from this country, from the people of this country. So it's this, all former presidents and political leaders in this country are very, very rich, and they certainly didn't become that by their salaries. So the corruption is there and it's real. However, you have to look at it from the context of this is not 2018 anymore, it's 2026. This government has had 8 years to prosecute these cases. From what we know, as far as the Anti-Corruption Committee, I think they've recovered less than $50 million, which is obviously far less than the number that was actually likely stolen from this country, which leads you to three things, which means that over the past 8 years, the current government or the judicial authorities, one, have been completely incompetent, which is quite possible. Two, they don't really want to prosecute these cases because they themselves have vulnerabilities, because one day they're going to be out of office, and there's greater and greater reports of corruption even within the ranks of the current party. It's a different kind of corruption. The corruption we have now is sort of opportunity seeking, where someone's wife gets a position they shouldn't have, someone gets contracted, it's not the opportunity killing corruption that we had before. Corruption is corruption. We should all be against it, but there's a context to it. And the third one is that they don't really have the cases. And what I mean by that is, internationally, there's an entire world of lawyers, attorneys making thousands of dollars an hour that have perfected the art of stealing money from countries like Armenia and many countries like us and hiding it in places in which your average Armenian prosecutor is not going to be able to beat or find out what these London lawyers did and what came in the island account are these monies in. So you can go after this dealership or this and that here, but for the most part, for 8 years, they've actually failed to prosecute. So on the one hand, you have what I call the justice case, which actually exists and is something that most people would say, yes, let's take the stolen money back. People who stole money should be prosecuted. But then concurrently, this is no longer, 2018, 2019. We also have the current political context. And the second part of this thing is what I call, there's a movie, it's the 2018 Forever. I call it. And then it has its sequels, and every sequel is less interesting, but still makes money than the previous one. And this Forever 2018 is the position of this government, which is whenever convenient, whenever you're in trouble, whenever you're angry, you go off and bring up these old cases and arrest these people and call these people in, when in many cases you can't really do much about it. But it's political red meat to your base, that solid base of 20-30% that this prime minister has, that wants this 2018 Forever campaign. And this is so much part of that. It's this continual effort to sort of feed his political base that I'm actually going after. I'm going to bring out corruption. I'm going to fight corruption, and I'm going to make your lives better by taking money away from these thieves that stole it from you for 30 years. So everybody in this country at this point, like since these arrests yesterday, if you're an ultra for this government, you'll excuse anything. If you are very much on the opposition side, you would say that all of this is illegitimate and it's all political. And most people are stuck in the middle because they understand that we do need justice, but at the same time, justice cannot be instrumentalized by one man and one party for their own political purposes whenever they need it. So we have to understand this in the complexity of the whole thing. And for the most part, I would say it's a distraction. We have bigger fish to fry. This is the same week where the prime minister is using Azeri names for the enclaves inside of Armenia. God knows, where he's going with that. So whenever he's in this, he gets pressed, or he thinks he's in political trouble or doing unpopular things, the way to make it up is to have another round of arrests. And I'm sure most of these people will get out in a couple of months, and most of these cases will be dropped for various different reasons, because that's really been the case over the last 8 years. They have dramatically failed to actually prosecute or actually be able to take back properties that were stolen from the state and the people in systematic ways.
Yeah, right after the revolution, Kocharyan was arrested back then as well. People especially, like, that was one of the things they were pushing for at the beginning. They were like this March 1st events back in 2008 where 10 people were shot in protests right after the election that Kocharyan was leaving office. It was a very, very difficult time for Armenia, and it really scarred it for years. And a lot of people associate Kocharyan with that, and they wanted him punished. But statute of limitations, most of those have expired. And like you said, they're trying to find whatever they can to still prosecute him. But, we have this catch-22 where, yes, we have oligarchs that have stolen a lot over decades, and we want them punished, but the restitution is not easy, and also it's selective because there are oligarchs that are on the current government side as well. And so, I both don't want to say, oh, well, then we can't prosecute anyone because it's not fair, but then also we do want justice. It's just a really hard thing for me to get around. What is the right way forward?
Well, it's very hard to say. You either have to say, you draw a green line and say, everyone, we start from zero. We don't, whatever's passed is passed for everyone. But that's not likely to happen. I'm afraid what's really going to happen is that a very legitimate case for justice is going to be made entirely illegitimate by a government that is entirely politicizing a process that should be legal and not political for its own purposes. His son asks you some tough questions and his party is giving you trouble, and the next day you go arrest a bunch of people, and including his son. You go shut down a dealership, for example, the famous Toyota dealership that was raided, which his own police forces buy their cars from that dealership. Oh. So what are we talking about here? So their actions, the politicization of this justice system, is actually doing a lot of disservice for the actual justice that people want for what was done to this country for more than 2 decades.
Now, I don't know if you realize it or not, but we are in the Fourth Republic. This is what the Prime Minister said at this Monday hearing. Now, the first, for the viewers at home, the First Republic is the 1918 briefly independent Armenia. The Second Republic was the Soviet Socialist Republic of Armenia from the 20s until 91. And then the Third Republic was 91 until apparently this election. Even before the election, Prime Minister Pashinyan was talking about this idea of a Fourth Republic coming upon us, and now it's here. So what does it mean? What is a Fourth Republic? What changed?
First and foremost, in Armenia, actually, a lot of people will tell you we're in the Second Republic because they don't consider the Soviet Republic as legitimate or independent. So to make things even more frivolous and ridiculous. There was at the end of the Cold War, there was a famous book by Francis Fukuyama. It was The End of History, which was the main thesis being that capitalist liberal democracy has won, and there's no competitors to it, and you're either in the system and you win, or you're not and you're a loser. And British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who was actually quite conservative, was asked about this idea, and her response was, "End of history." He goes, "That sounds like the beginning of nonsense." and I think so is this Third or Fourth Republic conversation. First and foremost, a political leader in a democratic system cannot declare a new republic. A new republic is a constitutional order, so he can't simply say we have a new one, and he neither has the legal authority or the moral authority to actually declare such a thing. But let's just take him at his word that we were in the Third Republic. He's saying the Third Republic was based on the logic of war, and the Fourth Republic is based on the logic of peace. But that's not honest. First of all, the Third Republic was not based on the logic of war, because as soon as war ended in 94, the 3 Armenian leaders, including Mr. Pashinyan himself, didn't declare war on another country, didn't want anyone else's territories, didn't want war. They did everything they could, all of them, for whatever you think of them, to avoid war, to have a peaceful settlement to the Artsakh issue. And they weren't seeking, land from other countries or anything like that. So to say that the Third Republic was based on the logic of war is not true. The Third Republic, in real terms, was based on the logic of victory. The Third Republic was based on the logic of a victory which was squandered over the next 2 decades. The Fourth Republic, if we're being honest, that he wants to declare is based on a logic of defeat, which he doesn't want to say. So if you substitute war and peace with defeat and victory, then you'll get a real sense of what this is all about. This is just a nonsensical wordplay for a very simple thing, that he is incapable of taking responsibility for the disasters and the failures that his government has been a part of over the last 6 years. That isn't to say that's all there's been. There's been many positive things, but they don't have the moral or the ethical capacity to take their responsibilities for the disaster of the defeat in Artsakh and the ethnic cleansing, which by any measure is the greatest disaster for the Armenian people since 1915. There's no other way to put it. So all of this is sophistry and nonsense to try to cover up a lack of capacity to take responsibility. And the way you do that is by trying to make everyone before you, the causes that they supported, the victories that they won, as illegitimate. And you simply cannot have any respect for an approach like this.
Now, is this Fourth Republic perhaps another way of also saying this real Armenia stuff he always brings up? Like, does the Fourth Republic embody the real Armenia versus whatever the fake Armenia was, I guess, before?
Yeah, but the prime minister walks around with a flag, with a map of the country, which is very awkward. You will not see any other leader anywhere in the world walk around with a map of his country. They'll walk around with a flag, with some other symbol. But the map that he walks around with, there are areas that he cannot go to. Exactly. He does not control that is occupied. Maybe he should take a marker and just mark those people out. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, we shouldn't spend intellectual capital trying to figure this out. This is a moral failure, and it's just a lot of meaningless words to try to cover up a person and a political team that doesn't have the moral courage to take responsibility for their failures.
Something else you mentioned in those regards is about the Armenian genocide recognition, which has been the cause for the diaspora for many, many decades, and really is still kind of what holds us together. It's not that it holds us together. There are many other things, the church, but that common experience of enduring the genocide is something that I don't think, others can really fully comprehend or understand. And he's saying that, reiterating that the Armenian government's policy going forward is that we do not seek recognition. We do not seek, he makes all these references to a lost homeland. And I mean, that's where we're from. It is a lost homeland. He criticizes it by saying, this is our homeland. Armenia is everything. But at the same time, I mean, Armenia is so much more than the Armenia here. The Armenia here is the legal entity, and it plays an incredibly important role in that, which we cannot take for granted. But just saying that all of Armenia and its history is right within these borders, which, as you said, some of those borders are occupied by Azerbaijan, and we can't even go there, yet it's on his pin. What do you make of this?
It's listen, first of all, in all fairness, the genocide recognition has never been the primary policy of any Armenian government in Armenia. Mm-hmm. He's just more honest and explicit in saying so. So I think we need to be very clear about that. But it also gives off the lack of political imagination, because in the context of the Armenian state, the Armenian genocide actually can be weaponized, and it can be weaponized in the fact that we cannot. Our principal position is that we will never allow this to happen again, and where we have the moral political right to take any actions to prevent this from ever happening again, which was the position of the Armenian government in regards to Artsakh, which is we will not allow a second Armenian genocide. So this is a man who actually, on his watch, allowed the second Armenian genocide. And now he's saying that talking about it is not legitimate. That's quite self-serving. So the genocide issue for Armenia has not been used well in the defense of the Republic of Armenia. For example, during the entire 94 to 2020 period, we could have made the genocide issue is everything about Artsakh is preventing a second genocide. We cannot, and you could just constantly make that the primary narrative. And if we would have made that the primary narrative, this issue of occupation, this issue of territorial integrity would have been far greater mitigated than otherwise. So what he's saying is that he doesn't have the political imagination and how to use this tragedy to actually strengthen Armenian statehood and the security of this country, because he simply doesn't have that political imagination. So yes, he's more honest than right in a way, but he is entirely wrong in misunderstanding how you would use an issue like that. Armenia can use the genocide issue to actually make this country more secure and give itself more options when it comes to dealing with her enemies.
Well, he kind of used the same wording as you did. He described it as weaponizing the bones of our martyrs. And he said that as a bad thing. Whereas, I mean,
okay,
their memory...
We're not moralists here. This is politics. Okay? Every day, the Israeli government uses the Holocaust in one way or the other to do whatever it wants to any of its neighboring countries, because we will never allow that to happen again. Now, they have the power projection to do it, but the power projection wasn't always there, but the rhetoric always was. So more than anything, what he's given away is a lack of political imagination on how to weaponize something. Yes, it is the bones of our ancestors, but so what? That's politics. You know, is he that Christian or moral now that he doesn't want to use something like that for the purpose of defending our country? I don't care about that.
Our ancestors are why we're here. Yeah. I mean, that is a direct tie between us and them. It's not to say that we don't have the right to talk about them, to push for it's. And I will say, I mean, you're right. A lot of people do not believe this if they weren't around or didn't have the inside track. But I can tell you, 20 years ago, the groups in DC were critical quietly about the government. This was probably Kocharyan's government at the time, about saying, you know, they are trying to squash this. We are here in DC fighting for recognition from the U.S. government, and it's the Armenian government, which they felt was kind of
the Armenian government's position has always been that's not a critical thing for us. The only difference is that he has an ideological almost bone to pick these fights, which are unnecessary, useless, don't serve him, but yet they're more honest. But I don't see what the usefulness of them is politically.
Yeah, so if anything, you can't give too much credit to the past president. Now it's so black and white that it's like, oh, the past presidents were so supportive and he's so not. That's not true. It's not the truth either. So now one more thing when it comes to what he said. He announced that the new constitution, the text of it, will be presented by the end of the year. And this is to institutionalize the Fourth Republic. So apparently the Fourth Republic is here, but it needs its institutionalizations. I know in past cases like France, they really have changed the republic when they had a new constitution. So maybe that's when it hypothetically could happen. But another matter is actually passing the Constitution. How is that going to happen? And of course, the whole sort of Damocles hanging over all of this is the fact that Aliyev is demanding it. You know, while Pashinyan is trying to separate it, saying, no, this is a domestic thing, purely domestic issues. And it's true. The Constitution does require changes, I mean, from a domestic standpoint. It's not that it's wrong in itself to have this referendum and change it. But when we have these outside issues, and the whole peace deal apparently rides on that, though we know that's kind of an excuse. But let's just say, you know, this is never going to get passed until the referendum happens.
Well, he doesn't have the votes to actually put this up. There's two ways to put up a referendum in Armenia, which is to have a constitutional majority, which means over 70 seats, which he doesn't have. They can try to buy seats, try to throw some people out, and try to lower the threshold. There's different things that can be done. There's always people in the opposition that theoretically can be bought to get to that 70 vote. So, but at this point, they don't have the vote to put this thing up unless they make a deal with the opposition, which is highly unlikely. So they're not likely to have this. There is a signature process, which is very difficult on very short timelines. They need to get like 300,000 signatures. Then after you put it on the ballot, it not only needs to win a majority, it needs to get votes of 25% of voters, which is going to be close to 650,000 votes. Turnout scenarios being that in non-general primary elections where there's candidates and prime ministers, Armenia has historically very low turnout in elections that are one local or constitutional. Every constitutional amendment that's ever been passed in this country has passed that 25% turnout threshold by fraud. So if we don't have fraud, it's going to be very hard to pass this. So he's in a very difficult position to pass this. But we need to understand this. We cannot get distracted on this issue. This is the Aliyev constitutional referendum, no matter what they say. This is all there is. and everything else that can be put in it that's even good is irrelevant. This is done for one purpose and one purpose only, because he is forcing our government to do it, and which is a huge mistake for them to have accepted this, and is done for two purposes: to cause political chaos inside of Armenia, and more so is to force our people to vote for their own humiliation. Because everyone's going to know this is something demanded by our enemies and their dictator. They want us to vote for our own defeat and humiliation. This cannot be allowed to pass. This is going to divide this country, and it's, you know, you'll have the everyone who's for it. Well, for the lack of a better phrase, it's the Vichy vote. You know, it's the collaborationist vote. That's okay with this humiliation and being told what to do by Baku, and the free Armenians, which are going to be very varied. It's going to be from the old regime to Bolorin Dem to Haik Marutian to, you know, the pro-Western democratic forces. This is going to divide this country between these two. You're either with the collaborationists, which is to give Aliyev what he wants, or this is the beginning of this country standing back on its feet again and being able to stand up for its interests. We should not confuse it with any other issues. This is the Aliyev referendum, and you have to decide, are you for it or against it? And if you're for it or against it, you will mark yourself for the next 20 years in our internal politics.
Wow, well, that really makes it black and white, and there's a lot more to come from this. So, Eric, thank you so much for being here, and again, letting our viewers know really what's happening here in Armenia.
It's a pleasure, man.
And thank you for joining the CivilNet podcast.